So we're just a couple minutes out, so I'll go ahead and talk about format and a couple of our few rules before we move ahead. For anybody who's here or listening in who doesn't know who I am, I'm Cale Cowan. I'm the managing editor here at the Daily News. My timer over here is Philip Wolf, our deputy editor. So you've drawn for position. We're going to stick to that position through each round of this thing. So we're going to begin with 1 2-minute opening statement from each of you. And then we have a list of 8 questions that our editorial board came up with. And so we will ask each candidate 1 question, give you 2 minutes to respond. And then the other 3 candidates will be given 1 minute to respond to that question or respond to what they've just heard from the person who took the question first, however you choose to use your time. When you have 15 seconds remaining in your 2 minutes or your 1 minute, depending on which round it is, Philip will raise his hand. When you run out of time, he'll tell me and I'll cut you off gently. We have some spectators here. Ask them to observe only. I may, however, ask a follow-up question in your answer if you would like a little more clarity on your answer or felt that you haven't directly addressed our question. Any questions about that?
Yes. So every question that we're asked, we always answer in the same order?
Yes.
Every other one that we've been to, they rotate it.
Right.
Because it's kind of unfair for Anne-Marie to have to answer first every single time.
No. She'll answer. She's number 1, so she'll get the first question.
Right.
Ask her, and the next time I'll start with number 2. Number 2, but we'll keep the same order.
Oh, okay.
So I'll start with number 1 the first time,
right.
And then we'll go through that way. So yeah, so just we'll move through the order. We'll move through the order twice.
That's why he's so
for me.
Just no pole dance.
All right, it's noon on the nose, so we're going to get started. And Anne-Marie, you have the first 2 minutes for your opening statement, please.
Okay, I'm Anne-Marie Benoit. I'm running for the Green Party, Nanaimo-Cowichan, and I'm thanking you for inviting me here, Daily News, to do this recording. And our first 4 main issues are first, it's green job, second is health care, third is affordable housing, and fourth is funding for post-secondary education. So today I'd like to talk about democracy, economic opportunity and equality, environment, health, and that's what I'm here for. Thank you.
Okay. Brian Fillmore, please.
Okay, well, today and every day of this campaign so far, you've heard how this is an unnecessary election. And I disagree. Very, very important reasons why we're having this election right now. Our Prime Minister has been found in contempt of Parliament. That's a very serious charge. Our current government has probed Parliament not once but twice. What that means is whenever they don't get their way, they shut down the government so that we can't talk about things. They used the Senate to kill important climate change legislation that was passed by your members of the House. Your elected members put it through, and a hand-picked Senate basically killed this legislation without even a discussion. It's an embarrassment for democracy. And finally, Canada has lost its rightful seat on the UN Security Council. Again, it's an embarrassment internationally for us as a nation, and we need to have this election for exactly those reasons. Democracy has received some big blows under the current government, but this unnecessary election can make it right. Canada's international reputation has dropped down several rungs on the ladder, but this unnecessary election can make that right. And Canada has always been known as a beloved peacekeeper, and this unnecessary election can make that true. And Canada has gone from years of budget surpluses, handing over a $13 billion surplus to the current government, which was gone before the recession even hit. And this unnecessary election can make that right again. My name is Brian Fillmore, and I'm with the Liberal Party, and I'm asking for your vote on May 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you. Jean Crowder.
Great, thank you. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're on this Nanaimo people's traditional territories. I'd like to thank the the paper for organizing this important discussion, my fellow candidates, and of course any of the participants who are watching. I was elected in 2004, and for the past 7 years have been working hard here in the riding and in Ottawa. And as a mother and a grandmother, I am more concerned than ever about the livability of our communities. And I'm very concerned about what we're passing on to future generations, and certainly being a grandmother has brought that home for me. I think we need to focus on the environmental, the social, and the economic when we're developing policy and legislation. And what New Democrats have put together is practical, affordable solutions that speak to the issues that are arising here in Nanaimo-Cowichan, in our province, and throughout the country. We've been listening to the communities that we represent, and New Democrats not only talk the talk, but we walk the walk. And I've got some concrete examples about what we have achieved over the last several years. Under the environment, we tabled Bill C-311, the Climate Change Accountability Act, and that set hard targets both in the short, medium, and long term based on the Kyoto Protocol to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. We've called for a ban for oil tankers on the North Coast. And certainly when we talk about the ENN, and I know the rail station here is being upgraded, and it's a very important part of the transportation hub that Nanaimo is, that we've called for reinvestment in the island corridor so that we can have not only the freight access but also the commuter access. Under social, we tabled a housing bill that outlines a national affordable housing strategy. We've developed proposals for long-term care and for home support, and we know that Nanaimo has a seniors population. And under the economic, of course, banning raw log exports, investing in renewable energies, reducing business taxes for small and medium-sized businesses. I'm Jean Crowder. May 2nd, vote Jean Crowder and NDP. Thank you.
Thank you. John Corey.
Thank you. Hi, I'm John Corey, and thank you all for coming today, and thank you to the Nanaimo Daily News for organizing this event. And I'd also like to recognize and a moment to remember our workers who have been injured or lost their jobs on this National Day of Mourning. An important day for all of us to remember. Now, the reason why I'm running is to end this cycle of these unnecessary elections, especially this time around. You know, I've knocked on literally thousands of doors during this election, and people time and time again have told me, you know, they are sick and tired of these kinds of elections, that this one is a complete waste of money, that the country is doing well, and that we should just we should get on and do the job that Canadians elected us to do. And before this election, a budget was introduced by the Federal Minister of Finance that brought to bear the next phase of the Canada Economic Action Plan. And that Canada Economic Action Plan that has brought $100 million into this riding, which the NDP voted against, created hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of jobs in this riding and created an economic opportunities for the future. Things like the cruise ship terminal in Nanaimo, the expansion of the Nanaimo Airport, the road improvements leading up to the airport, hockey rinks, baseball fields, trails and pathways. These are the kinds of amenities that have been built right here for opportunities in the future, and we need to continue that progress on. And in the Cowichan Valley and Nanaimo, there's important infrastructure that we need to advocate for. There's a $2 billion infrastructure fund that we need a voice in government with a strong national majority government to get focused on what the priorities are for the voters in this riding. Thank you.
Thank you. We're now going to move into the question phase of our program today, and we're again going to start with Anne-Marie Benoit. Our first question: how do you balance the need for local resource management, like the gooey duck fishery, with the traditional rights of First Nations?
I don't know enough about that gooey duck, except I knew a few fishermen from back east that I've met over here that also knew my family. And when it comes to First Nation issue, I don't feel comfortable not having a First Nation person participating at the table right now, and I feel very disrespectful to talk about First Nation issue when there's nobody here to talk for them. I can't speak for them. This is not my territory, and all due respect, I don't know enough about the question. Thank you.
If you'll forgive me for following up, as a political representative, Is that not exactly what you're supposed to do, is to speak for your constituents, including the First Nations?
Yes, if I am voting in, and I do ask of them, and they say that I am allowed to speak on their behalf, I will do so.
Right. But you would agree that resource management rights is an important issue in this election?
It's for sure it is, yes. Okay. Yes.
Brian Fillmore, we'll move on to you.
You know, the
just as a reminder, 1 minute in response, please.
Sure. The crisis facing First Nations in this country is like it's the modern civil rights challenge facing Canada right now, and First Nations in this country are in big need of housing and jobs and education, and basically the government has walked away from the table on that. So what we have to do is have a strong Liberal government in charge who will come back to the table with First Nations and be able to start working on these issues that affect so many people in our nation. So if I'm elected, I will be the voice for First Nations in Ottawa, in Nanaimo-Cowichan. Thank you.
I'm sorry, so what you're saying then is if we elect a Liberal, then we should just trust that you will then have an answer for us after the election?
Absolutely. What we have to do is we have to actually get back to the bargaining table, which we've walked away from.
But the question wasn't about bargaining with First Nations. The question was balancing resource management with the rights of First Nations.
I don't understand what you mean.
So if we're talking about the geoduck fishery, for instance, where they have a claim to the waters,
right,
that we're talking about there, but the criticism would be that it can't be perhaps overfished. So we're talking about managing the resource for the good of the land versus their claim to fish it. So this is, when you get to the table to negotiate this, that is what the predicament is going to be. So the question to you is, how do you deal with that predicament?
Thank you for clarifying that. But I come from Nova Scotia, where the fishery was allowed to be decimated. So the protection of the fishery would have to come first. So obviously, First Nations and the federal government would have to be at the table together and be able to put in a sound management plan for that resource. So we can't allow it to be destroyed, regardless of who's right or wrong. It has to be solved.
Jean Crowder, I'm sorry, do you need the question again?
No, I'm fine with it.
Thank you.
I think there's a couple of issues. First of all, what's happening with Stuminas points to the lack of treaties that are in place. With treaties, what you do is actually allocate a percentage of the fisheries, in this case, geoduck. And along with that, you also assign resources for conservation. In other treaties, what they've actually done is they've put resources into conservation management as part of assigning that particular percentage of the resource. That's what needs to happen in this case. There's uncertainty both in the resource sector but also in terms of economic development because of the lack of treaties. The treaties are the answer in order to deal with the resource management issue.
Right. Thank you. John Corey.
And of course the flaw in the NDP response to that is treaties are a complex issue, and it could take years and years and years before we get resolution to those issues because of the local government and provincial government and federal government involvement in treaty negotiations. Work has got to be done now. And the federal government has demonstrated that they are able and capable to work with First Nations to improve things like self-governance and creating their own self-reliant economy on these issues. Yes, there is a balance that needs to be struck, and I think that's the essence of your question. What is the balance? And the balance is conservation and economic development. And we need to find that balance and come to the table and work closely with First Nations to allow that to happen.